Hello and welcome, everybody, to the reading of The Great Exodus, or The Time of the End, How Near Are We to It? A book by James Aiken Wylie in 1862 that we have uncovered from a library here locally in Minneapolis, thanks to some digging on the internet. And of course, James Aiken Wylie has written some wonderful works, one of which Jurk Listman of Belgium just reminded me of this book called Roman Civil Liberty. And Tom Fress did a reading of that back in, I think it was 2015 or 2016 into 2016. And it was a fantastic study of how the Roman Church and the Romanists, the ecclesiastical head of the power that receives its power from the dragon, of course, how that had influenced and infiltrated, should we say, into the government of Great Britain, into Protestantism, the heart of Protestantism, and thereby conquering the entire Protestant domain of the whole world. And their strategy actually worked really well. But you can't really see that detail unless you do some research on your own and start thinking outside of the box, because the box that we are given by this world in this Antichrist system will never, ever admit to any wrongdoing, of course, in that realm of what should we call it? Ecclesiastical authority. I don't know how to even put that into words right now, because I'm just waking up over here in Minnesota, and I'm joined here with both Michael and Jurk Listman in Europe. So, Jurk, sounds like you're ready to go.
Yeah, isn't there this one book out that is called Ecclesiastical Megalomania? Isn't that the word you were looking for?
Yeah, it was Jesse Vessel that was... I think he touched on that one way back in 2015. I remember him talking about that a little bit on some of the podcasts he did.
Oh, brother Jesse, that is a long time ago that we heard of
him,
isn't it?
But it seems like it was yesterday to me still. I was talking with Michael the other day. It just seems like those 4 years, it just, it was just yesterday to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't heard of his mother anymore. She contacted me once and told me that he went back into the world and his girlfriend was much more important than Jesus Christ. And ever since, I haven't heard of Jesse Vessel anymore. I have many of his videos mirrored on my second YouTube channel,
Sure.
Joggers War on Disinfo. And I so much like Jesse Vessel and the studies we did together. He was such a fine brother in Christ. And I say past time he was, because I think he is not anymore, and there's no way to reach him. He is not on YouTube. I don't have any contact with his mother anymore, so what can you do? Huh?
You can only do so much, and then you got to let go. That's what I've found, Jurk, and it's better not to crowd these people out. If they make up their mind and that's what they want to do, then they got to reap what they sow.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's correct.
So, Michael, welcome to our broadcast today on this, what is it now? November 23rd, our Sabbath day, 2019, and we are going to delve into Chapter 2 of the second portion of the book, The Son of Man, or the Antithesis. So, Michael, welcome.
Hi, Bret. Hi, dear listener. Thanks for having me. Is my voice okay? Is my voice right? Oh, it's perfect. Okay, so yes. That's the only thing which is perfect at the moment, because my computer is going slightly mad. So everything is quite usual. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I had your audio quality already better than this, but it's all right. We can live with that, Michael. Good. So let's say we going to start reading, as Bret already announced, in the book The Great Exodus, or The Time of the End, How Near Are We to It? James Aiken Wylie, from the mid-19th century. On page 216 in the book, 217 on the PDF, if you're going to read along, chapter 2 of part 2 of the book, The Son of Man, or the Antithesis. We now pass to New Testament prophecy. And by the way, before we begin, no, I'm sorry, I didn't have any time to read anything of this book in advance. I'm busy with 7 different German projects for the moment, and I just didn't have the time to read this. I'm sorry. So please forgive me if my pronunciation here and there is a little bit off, or my understanding is a little bit off. I hope that the Holy Spirit will lead me into all truths and give the understanding of this book, and that's where we are. We are with 3 people here together, gathered in Jesus Christ's name, and we ask the guidance of the Holy Spirit to lead us into all truths and the understanding of this book that James Edkin Wylie wrote. So, that must be enough for that part, so now I'm going to start. We now pass to New Testament prophecy. Like the mariner, I remember, it was mariner. Like the mariner when he crosses the equator and sees new and more beautiful constellations ascend the horizon, objects unseen by us before, or, if seen before, seen dimly and from afar, now rise upon our side. The kingdom of the beast begins visibly to recede, and the kingdom of the Son of Man begins to draw nigh, comes prominently into view. With these 2 kingdoms, the whole of Revelation is occupied. In the prophecy of Daniel, the kingdom of the beast is the most prominent object. It is not, it is true, the only object, but it is by far the most prominent. It is seen rising bigger and higher, filling the whole stage, drawing to itself all the power and glory of the world, eclipsing the kingdom of the Son of Man, and, one would think, utterly extinguishing it, were it not that a glimpse is obtained of that kingdom when the empire of the beast is overthrown at the coming of the Ancient of Days. In the New Testament, on the other hand, the kingdom of the Son of Man is seen as the object of primary importance. It is small at first, but it is instinct with the principle of celestial life. It continues to grow. It fills at last the whole field of vision. It expels by its own native power the antagonist kingdom from the earth. And the last glimpse we have of the world, as Revelation drops the curtain, is a truly blessed one, and may well repay us for all the sights of calamity and of woe which had gone before. A serene and glorious light mantles the earth. Peace hath descended on the gentle wing. The world is wrapped in a sweet and holy repose, and the nations and kindreds are seen walking together in love and dwelling in safety beneath the scepter of the Son of Man. There is an obvious antithesis betwixt these 2 kingdoms. That antithesis we can trace all through the Bible. It begins on its very first page, and it is seen upon its very last. That antithesis we can trace in every particular of these 2 kingdoms. In all things they are radically and internally antagonistic, and every figuration of them in prophecy is markedly and designedly antithetical. A brief consideration of that antithesis, as figuratively shown, will give us a deep insight into the nature and origin of these 2 kingdoms. First comes the kingdom of the beast. Its name is sufficiently indicative of its nature and principles. It was carnal, sensual, earthly. Its members and its objects were carnal, sensual, earthly. The principles of its government were bestial and tyrannical. Force is the attribute of the brute. Force is the glory of the brute, and by force was this kingdom set up, and by force was it maintained. Man listened to a beast and paradise rather than to God, and now he is justly punished by being put under the government of a beast for thousands of years. When developed into the monstrous bulk and brute ferocity in which this beast was seen in the 4 kingdoms, it might have been said to man, "Behold thy God." It was now that the fall was consummated. In antithesis to the kingdom of the beast stands the kingdom of man, for Son of Man is but an Orientalism for man. It is the government of intelligence and justice in opposition to that of brute force. It is man put antithetically to the beast, man filled with wisdom, animated by the heavenly influences of clemency and mercy and truth, and guided by reason, and that reason subordinated to the will of his Maker. Now that's a very important point. That reason, because we are speaking in the foundation of the United States of America from the age of reason, don't we? We speak of Thomas Paine, who wrote a book about the age of reason. Thomas Paine, who is the spiritual founder of the Georgia Guidestones, if you allow me to say it this way. And the points these quote-unquote founding fathers of the United States made, when they rely upon reason, they rely upon their own hearts and not on reason subordinated to the will of our Maker. That is a very profound little difference, I think, that is important to put out right here. Huh? And if I was you, I wouldn't touch the works of Thomas Paine with a 10-foot pole. In short, the author continues to say, it is the kingdom of man in the image of God. The phrase expresses God's whole design as regards man, namely the restoration to man of his primeval integrity and happiness in all the extent to which the fall robbed him of them. The restoration of individual man to his primeval state by the renewing of the spirit, and the restoration of society to its primeval state by the government of the Bible. The government of the Bible. What do you guys in America love so much? The government for the people, by the people, of the people. No, it's the government of the Bible. Man should be governed by God, and by the morals of God, and by the dogmas of God, and not by the morals and dogmas of Albert Pike's philosophy of Freemasonry. Huh? But there's something deeper still in this antithesis. The kingdom of the beast has more in it than mere brute force, and the kingdom of man has more in it than mere reason, however purified and exalted. The inner principle of the kingdom of the beast is an infernal one, and the inner principle of the kingdom of man is a divine one. And it is in this that the antithesis mainly consists. The beast, the serpent in paradise, and the four monarchies in after age. We remember the four monarchies from Daniel, first Babylon, then Medo-Persia, then Greece, then Rome, were but the exterior covering or organization. They were just the mask Satan hid behind all the time, and still hides behind today. Within that covering lay hid the old serpent, the devil, who deceived the nations. The kingdom of the beast, therefore, was not tyrannical merely. It was diabolical. It was a system of demonology. And the kingdom of man was not the government of reason merely. No, it was the government of the eternal Word. It was the government of the Son of God. The antithesis is farther to be traced in the coming of the beast and in the coming of the Son of Man. There was a quote-unquote coming of Satan, just as there was a quote-unquote coming of Christ. But there's this difference to be noticed betwixt the two comings. The quote-unquote coming of Satan was a continued process of exaltation. The quote-unquote coming of Christ was a continued process of humiliation. Each successive stage in the first brought a new access of power and glory. Each successive stage in the second brought a fresh diminution of dominion and influence. Satan came in the progression of the four monarchies. Each monarchy, or each monarch, rose upon the world in greater power than that which had been before it. Each monarchy furnished Satan with a fitter medium of operation. Each monarchy was a fuller and clearer revelation of Satan's character. Now we understand why the last monarchy, the papacy, is the purest revelation of Satan's character to my understanding. I think my brothers with me here on the broadcast agree, right?
That's right.
Each monarchy was a more vivid and faithful representation of Satan's image. Now, Christ was, quote, the image of the invisible God, the brightness of the Father's glory, unquote. The four kingdoms, again, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome, were the image of Satan, the shadow of his darkness. He stood incarnated in them. How much nearer he would have come to man, what yet more exact and terrible likeness of himself he would have given on earth, we cannot say. For at this stage of his coming the cross interposed it. Hitherto, but no farther. Just taking a sip of my coffee. Christ's quote-unquote coming was from the foundation of the world. But it is from the quote-unquote cross that his coming in his glory dates. Each successive phase of his kingdom has shone upon the world as a clearer illustration of the divine principles and rules, and as a more faithful likeness of Christ's person and character. It has filled a wider and yet wider sphere. As a clear and broad revelation of truth, the Reformation Church surpassed the primitive one. The Reformation one will, in its turn, to be surpassed by the Millennial Church. Now let us mark how this antithesis is farther brought out in the prophetic figurations of the two kingdoms. Let us take the prophecy of Daniel and the prophecy of John and place them side by side. Well, just a little remark of myself. This is something, if you want to understand that very detailed and correctly, you have to read the book Romanism and the Reformation by Henry Grattan Guinness. He tells you the differences between Romanism on the one hand and Reformation on the other hand, when he distinctively shows the points that distinct them in the prophecies of the books of Daniel and the prophecies that John put out in the Revelation, of course, and of course he also refers to Paul. Never to forget, Paul maybe was not a quote-unquote prophet, but he very clearly announced who the Antichrist will be in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. To my humble understanding, there is no clearer place in all of the Bible to lay the fingertip on the wound who the Antichrist really is. When you understand 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 the way that God wrote it for you, you will have no doubt who the biblical, historical, and prophetic Antichrist is. There can be no doubt. And even though James Edgar Wylie here just talks of Daniel and John, I absolutely add the Apostle Paul. He was of such a vital importance. 2 Thessalonians 2 is the most important verse in the New Testament about identifying the Antichrist. To my understanding, at least. Okay? That's my understanding. Of course, you will not agree when you go to American churches because they tell, oh, the one who is in the way right now, the one who lets, well, that's the Holy Spirit. Ha ha ha. That's not true. And when you have an understanding like that, you don't have the understanding of the Holy Spirit. Let me tell you that. You have to pray for the Holy Spirit to lead you into all truth, as Jesus Christ promises you in John chapter 16, where he says that when the Comforter comes, he will lead you into all truth, and the truth is understanding the Bible, and understanding 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 correctly is of utmost importance. But please, I heard some rumble behind. There's somebody who wants to say something.
Yeah, I think that that's a profound point with the 2 Thessalonians, because in recent time I came across some web pages who are doubting the authenticity of the 2 Thessalonian chapter in favor of the Roman Catholic Church, of course, you see. So it's just no new subject, but after all, there are some influences now that all these critical chapters are not real, and some kind of doubt in it, and Roman Catholic Church is doubting this and that, and so I think that maybe in the future also the Thessalonians chapter will be excluded from the Bible, if the Bible will not be forbidden after all, you see. That's my 2 cents.
Well, there are also many people, brother, who say that Paul was not an apostle, and that the writings of Paul shouldn't be in the Bible. Well, if you take the writings of Paul out of the Bible, you can throw out 70% of the New Testament and put it in the garbage can.
Yeah, maybe that's the goal.
Exactly. Of course, that's the underlying goal of people who deny the authenticity of the Bible. And the authenticity of the Bible is that God inspired men to write his mind in words, in black or white or whatever color, in a book that we call the Holy Bible today, the Holy Book. Yeah.
After all, if they would exclude the New Testament and also Revelation, then they will have a carte blanche. You see, then they would have, then they could join with the Jews, for example. Huh?
Yeah, but you know that all goes together with denying that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh.
Yeah.
Because when you deny the New Testament, then you deny that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh, and Jesus Christ warned us in the New Testament that anybody who denies that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of the spirit of Antichrist. And there your circle closes, you know.
True. Yep.
And they always do that with character attack. They do that with Paul, you know. Oh, but Paul was a Sadducee, Paul was an inquisitor, Paul was a heathen, Paul was this, Paul was that. You know, in the Bible, in I think chapter 9 of the Acts of the Apostles, it is written that on the road to Damascus, Paul did not have a vision, but he had an actual meeting with the one and true only, yours, Jesus Christ. And because he had that meeting, that was the basis for his apostleship. Because to be an apostle, you have to have personal, not a personal connection, but you have to be an eyewitness of Jesus Christ. And you can only be an eyewitness when you meet him in the flesh. And Paul met him in Apostles chapter 9. And that cemented his apostleship that he later started.
Oh, Acts chapter 9, Jörg? Was it?
Yeah, what did I say? I threw the name.
Apostle chapter 9.
Yeah, that's, yeah. You know,
okay,
that is
Acts, yes. I just wanted
to... He went the road to Damascus.
Acts in Germany is Apostelgeschichte, and that's
interesting.
That's why I mixed those two up in my mind. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. It's just, you know, it's us here in America are kind of clueless as far as the language goes.
We say in English we say Acts of the Apostles, and in German it's Apostelgeschichte, means Geschichte der Apostel, history of the apostles.
See, isn't that interesting? Because, you know, Jesus came to Saul at the time, of course.
Yes.
And converted him to an apostle.
By striking him blind for 3 days.
Yeah, many will not accept that because he wasn't an apostle while Jesus was walking in the flesh, but he was walking in the Spirit.
He wasn't a disciple. Yeah, you know the disciples became apostles when Jesus went to the cross,
I see.
Yeah. Except one. Except one. That's Judas, who killed himself because he betrayed Jesus.
Yeah.
And that place was then taken by Paul. Yeah.
Sure.
And it was Jesus Christ who gave the legitimation to Paul's apostleship himself. But many people doubt that. Why? Because they don't accept what the Bible explains, they only accept what man explains to them. People love to hear Bible explanation, exegesis by men, instead of reading the Bible.
Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy.
And vain philosophy.
Vain deceit, yeah. After the traditions of men and not after Christ.
Exactly. That's the point that you are correctly paraphrasing here from the King James Bible. Absolutely. Exactly. That's the problem. We listen, or we love to listen more to man than we love to listen to God.
It's true.
But when we listen to
remember, the broad scope of this book now is talking about the prophecy of John and of Daniel.
Yes.
And how these two books are specifically prophecy.
Well, let me tell you one thing before we even go further in the book. The one prophecy is a mirror of the other.
Yes.
And the one cannot exist without the other.
That's correct.
And that's the
Old
wonderful
covenant to new covenant. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the wonderful working of this holy book. And Paul is right in between. You know, you have on the one hand Daniel in the Old Testament, you have John in the New Testament, and you have a mediator between those two, and that's Paul. He binds it together. And with his 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, he makes it undeniable clear who the Antichrist is. That is spoken of in Daniel, chapter 2, chapter 7, and so on. And that is spoken in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, chapter 17, chapter 18, and so on. The connecting point between those two is Paul. And that's just why I picked out the point that James Wylie here speaks of Daniel and John, and I said, don't ever forget Paul, and if you want to get the true understanding of that, please read Romanism and the Reformation. Because you guys both agree with me. Michael has read Romanism and the Reformation with me in German. You have read Romanism and the Reformation in English. I read them both. You both will agree with me that next to the Bible, Romanism and the Reformation is the most important book a Bible-believing Christian should have read and understood. Correct?
Correct. Can't argue with that.
And Henry Grattan Guinness uses Daniel as well as John, but he also uses Paul, and especially 2 Thessalonians 2. And that's the point that I just want to make. No criticism whatsoever on the way how James Atkin Wylie leads us into this chapter, into the understanding of the prophecies of Daniel and John. But I just want to mention before he maybe he does it later on, I don't know, I haven't read this part, I told you. I haven't read a sentence of what we're reading today. It's also for me a premiere today. Maybe he mentions Paul later on, but here explicitly in the last sentence that I just read, he speaks of Daniel and John, and that's why I say you should always, always, always put Daniel in perspective with Paul and John together, and vice versa.
Well, yeah, where doesn't it say in the Bible, Jörg, that everything will be established with two or three witnesses?
Exactly.
So there's our third witness, brother.
There's our third witness. You took the words right off my mouth, brother, because that was what was going to say.
All right, that's perfect. Okay, now we're clarified on that for everyone that might be a little slow, including myself. So let's continue.
Good. We find they are designedly counterparts. On the opening page of both, there is a glorious image of the power which each respectively introduces. The pictured likeness is first seen, and then comes one historical detail, giving at full length the character. On the first page of Daniel stands the quote-unquote great image which rose before Nebuchadnezzar in his dream. That's chapter 2. In form so terrible and brightness so excellent. On the first page of John stands one like unto the Son of Man. Here begins the contrast at its lowest point. The antithesis is placed in that life which the one wanted and the other possessed. On the one side we have the dead image, on the other we have the living man. The one is the kingdom of death, the other is the kingdom of life. Subsequent visions will further unfold and illustrate the true character of each, but these visions still maintain the antithesis. In the second representation, or the night visions of Daniel, quote, 4 great beasts, unquote, are seen to pass across the stage. And in the second vision of John, he beholds, quote, a lamb, as if it had been slain, unquote. The contrast here is between the wild beast and the lamb, between the bestial and tyrannical principles on which the one was to rule and the meekness and truth of the other. Especially is indicated here the sacrificial character on which our Lord's dominion is founded. The one power came to destroy, the other came to save. The one is the reign of destruction, the other is the reign of peace. You can also go back to the book Rulers of Evil to make a little understanding of this. In chapter 25, the two ministries, it speaks of the ministry of condemnation and the ministry of reconciliation. Well, this is in other words exactly the same thing. And this is why I love Rulers of Evil so much. It is such a wonderful book, completely misunderstood by many people, but here, in what James Atkin Riley wrote in the mid-19th century, we can see an absolutely mirror of what Tupper Saucy wrote in the end of the 1990s. The one power came to destroy, the ministry of condemnation, the other one came to save, the ministry of reconciliation. The one is the reign of destruction, the other is the reign of peace. Do you now see how helpful it is to read different kind of these books? You can make connections you have never ever even dreamt of. A third illustrative vision is given of both. The kingdom of the beast culminates in the horn, with its eyes of craft and its mouth of blasphemy. And the kingdom of the Son of Man culminates in the rainbow-clothed angel standing on the sea and the dry land, in token of that universal dominion which he exercises as king of his church. Thus, all the leading visions of the world power in Daniel and all the leading visions of the divine power in John are designedly counterparts of each other. The subordinate parts of both visions are so arranged as to bring out the antithesis with yet more fullness and point. The beast is seen rising out of the abyss. The Son of Man is seen descending from heaven. Nothing could convey a more vivid idea of the utter contrariety of origin and character existing betwixt the two. The one has 7 heads, or, which is the same thing, sits upon 7 mountains. The other walks in the midst of 7 candlesticks. The beast, then, is shown to us surrounded with those 7 great kingdoms which had upheld and propagated his idolatry, while Christ is seen in the midst of those 7 churches which, illumined with his own brightness, not their own brightness. Very, very interesting point to make for the Freemasons who are listening here. Illumined with his own brightness became the organs of diffusing his light over the earth. Let us mark this apparently trivial but not uninstructive point. While the beast has for its seat the 7 mountains, and so is upheld by them, the Son of Man holds the stars in its right hand. idolatry required to be upholden by the kingdoms of the world, but Christ by his own power upholds the church. Few symbols have more divided opinion than the 7 heads of the beast. From what we have just said, it will be seen that we descend from the modern interpretation which explains these heads of the 7 forms of government successively adopted at Rome, and that we incline to the most ancient of all views regarding these heads. The world power is here depicted. We are inclined to think in its totality, as it existed throughout the 7 times, and the 7 heads represent the universal monarchies. With regard to the beast, says Oberlin, in his criticism of Hoffman's view, who revived this opinion in modern times, quote, the interpretation of the heads as denoting the world kingdoms or ages of the world is found in the writings of Irenaeus and Hippolytus, more distinctly in Andreas of Caesarea and Cappadocia, who lived at the end of the 5th century, of whose connected commentary on the Apocalypse and the root of all succeeding ones. And the footnote only gives us the source of Oberlin's work on the prophecies of Daniel on page 403, so nothing we need to get into more deeply. These 7 heads or kingdoms were Assyria, Babylonia, Media, Persia, Grecia, Rome, the 10 kingdoms. The first 5 had fallen in the days of John, as was intimated to him, as we can read in Revelation chapter 17, verse 10. The 6th, or Roman, was then in being, and the 7th had not yet come into being, the Romanic Gothic, to wit. We must necessarily conceive of the beast as different from the 7 successive heads in which he had lived. Though in one sense the beast and his heads were identified, in another they were distinct. These kingdoms were but his body. Paganism was the soul. This was strictly the beast, the old serpent, the devil. That beast appeared to have been wounded to death when the empire became, quote-unquote, Christian, I add the quotes. But soon the empire lapsed again into paganism, and so the beast returned from the abyss, fulfilling the prediction as written in Revelation chapter 17, verse 11. Quote, the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. Unquote. He belonged to all the 7. He had lived throughout them all. But as he is, quote, the son of perdition, unquote, so he goeth into perdition. Now, this footnote we're going to look at a little bit more closely now. The author says here, regarding these 7 kingdoms, Hoffman's view is the following. Hoffman is another historian whose interpretation we are going to read right now. Quote, the 5 kings which are fallen are the Assyrian, Chaldean, Persian, Greek, and Antiochus. Rome's Caesar is the 6th. The 7th, whom John expects, is the Germanic. Unquote. Hengstenberg gives the same list of monarchies as forming the 7 heads of the beast, only he leaves out Antiochus and prefixes Egypt, in volume 2, pages 458 and 9 of his work. The historian Ebrod's 7th head are same as Hoffman's. Oberlin on page 271 and 72 in his work agrees with Hengstenberg, and so does Principal Furbain, who, almost alone among modern British expositors of prophecy, takes this view of the 7 heads. See his able work on prophecy. The arrangement the author has adopted is somewhat different, and has this merit, that the 7 monarchies embraced in his list run in the line of the image and are all indicated in it. Yeah, that was the footnote. So let's go back to the text. Now let us mark the antithesis, the author says. As the beast is seen surrounded with the great political organizations which had upheld and propagated his idolatry in the world, so the quote-unquote Son of Man is seen surrounded with the 7 churches, the organs through which his light and rule were to be diffused over the earth. The beast brings in his train, as the ministers of his will, Assyria, Babylonia, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, and, finally, the 10 kingdoms of modern Europe. And Christ comes followed by the 7 burning lamps, Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and finally Laodicea. The first we may regard as emblematic of the whole of that power, material and political, which was arrayed in support of idolatry, and the second as equally emblematic of the church in every age and in all countries. In fine, when the world power is seen concentrated in its 7th head, it has 10 horns. And when the divine power is seen concentrated in the woman, she has 12 stars upon her head. By its horns the beast executed its will, and made himself be worshipped by those who dwelt upon the earth. Through her stars, the doctrine of the 12 apostles, the church radiated her light around her and illumined the world. A further point of contrast may we note. Forming the, what is that word here, frontispiece? Yeah? Is that the way it's pronounced, Bret? Forming the frontispiece? Okay.
I'm not really familiar with this word, never seen it.
Oh, okay. So we have something in common here.
Yeah.
Forming the frontispiece, so to speak, of Daniel's prophecy, stands the world power. As a frontispiece, I would say that is the top of the spear, the way that I understand this. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Forming the frontispiece, so to speak, of Daniel's prophecy, stands the world power, begirt with the terrors of tyranny, a burning fiery furnace behind it, and in its mouth a threatening of death against all who should refuse to fall down and worship. On the front of John's revelation stands Christ, encompassed with celestial glory, and addressing his church in words which convey an assurance of life and are in studied contrast to the threatening of death of the world power. Quote, "Fear not. I am the first and the last. I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And have the keys of hell and of death." Unquote. And this concludes chapter 2. And we are going into chapter 3, the apocalypse or unveiling. But I want to ask my 2 brothers if we want to go into this already now, or we want to keep it a little bit short and maybe have a little discussion about the things we just read to round up our understanding and discussion of this chapter 2, or are we going to continue?
I think the latter
proposal?
applies well, Jörg. It's pretty much, I think we're close enough to do a discussion. How about you, Michael? What do you think?
I just got one reminder to the last chapter, because he just spoke of there was 2 forces. One force about destruction, and the other force is peace. And I think the other force is not only peace but creation, and that Satan and his angels are trying to destroy. So destruction for the creation. I think the 2 opposite forces are destruction and creation. That's my point.
That's a very good observed point. Yeah. Because the opposite of destruction is creation, huh?
In my humble opinion, yes.
Yeah. In my understanding too. Yeah. Yeah, even though I haven't read the pages that I just read to you in this book, The Great Exodus from James Atkin Wylie, I am quite satisfied with the understanding I had from reading it for the very first time. But I still want to go on the point that I made before, the author has his reasons why he doesn't mention Paul right here, right now. He only uses two sides. He mirrors the New Testament against the Old and the Old against the New, which is fine, which is perfect, which is no problem at all. But I think it is very important that we, in our understanding, who read this book, we understand that Paul is confirming everything as well as Daniel, as John said. He is the mediator between those two. Not the mediator, but he is the how do you call this?
Well, he's the apostle of the Gentiles, Jörg.
Yes, he is the one that also quote unquote enlightens all the people who have never heard of Jesus Christ. And,
absolutely.
And therefore he works very divinely against this beast, and he in all his teachings, and that's the point that I want to make, that Paul in all his teachings, he refers to the Old Testament and then translates what is written in the Old Testament into the New Testament. He is explaining to the people the law. For example, he says, if it wasn't for the law, I didn't know that I was a sinner. Right? Mm-hmm. Therefore, you first have to have the law. But the law is passed now that we are in the New Testament and we have grace. Okay? And Paul is the mediator between those two. And I just think it is very important that we understand this, because everything that James Atkin Wylie in this book said so far that we read today is 100% spot on. And there's no criticism whatsoever. I just want to add the position of Paul in this. That probably doesn't fit in the story as James Atkin Wylie wrote it in his book, but I think it is of profound
knowledge.
Yeah, understanding, I wanted to say. I think.
Revelation.
Yeah, it is of profound understanding of this whole book that we also include Paul in this. And that we don't only see the two sides, but that we see Paul as the connecting part between those two. And like James Atkin Wylie said, everything that Daniel proposed about the Antichrist, about the beast system, then John made the same propositions, but not of the beast system, but of the kingdom of Christ, and hold those two against each other. And you can see how the one, namely the beast system here on earth, is a material mirror of the spiritual kingdom of Jesus Christ. Materialistic and diabolical. Yeah? Everything is turned 180 degrees around. And yet, there we are again. The Antichrist teaches everything 180 degrees turned around from what the Bible teaches. Why?
Yep.
Because it is a mirror. A mirror is not is just a reflection of your own, but it is on the wrong side. Right is left, left is right. Right is wrong, wrong is right.
True. So if you look in the mirror, you're going to be looking backwards. Or yeah. I should say, it's an image, so it reflects the opposite. Because when you look behind you, the writing on the truck behind you is backwards, so you can't really read it properly unless it's one of these, what do you call these words that you can actually take a mirror to, and it almost reads the same if you were to flip the letters around the right way. I forget the name of it, but
inverse mirror or something like that.
Inverse, yeah. So, I mean, that's Satan right there in a nutshell. He just will invert everything, won't he?
Satan is just trying to sell us the kingdom of Christ on earth, but because it is in the materialistic world, it cannot be the kingdom of Christ. It will always be the opposite of that what Christ teaches, because materialism is the enemy of spiritualism. Or the material world is the enemy of the spiritual world, of the world that we are longing for, in the world that we know that our Father is and that Jesus Christ is, because Jesus Christ said the Father wants to be worshipped in spirit and in truth. But we are made to to forget about the spirit in this world that we live in. Because everything that we have here is carnal. Everything that we have here is materialistic. It's all about money. Money, 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 money. What is money else but material? Yeah? It's all materialistic. And we are not to be materialistic. We are to be spiritual. Spiritual in the sense, now don't get me wrong, I'm not speaking about quote-unquote New Age spiritualism of all that stuff, but I speak that we have to get into our minds and that we have to understand that our mind is led by a spirit. And hopefully not by a familiar spirit, but by the Holy Spirit. And it is that spirit that leads us into all understanding and into all truth. And that's exactly what he did in this reading. I love this little chapter that I just read. I found no fault in it. I find it very profound. I found James Atkin Wylie very well expressing himself also in the words that he has chosen to write this down 150 years ago. I love him for it. It really was a wonderful little read of this chapter. And I think that maybe on some other occasion, we should return to this chapter and do a special broadcast only about this. I mean, we just did a special broadcast about this, but we did it in the line of the reading of the book, The Great Exodus. I think that when we bring this chapter to Tom's attention, we could do a wonderful series of a few videos, of a few lectures, just going into this little chapter in the book, The Great Exodus, and examining it really to the bone. What we didn't do right now. We scratched on the surface, but you know.
Well, if Tom were to read this book, can you imagine? That would be incredible to hear his commentary on this book too.
That's the point I'm just making on this chapter.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I mean, that's what Tom has always said that we should do is read some Protestant works and study them, because this is where it's at right here, right now. So that's a great idea, Jörg. I'm really looking forward to continuing in the study. It's great.
Yeah, me too. Michael, some closing remarks?
Oh, I just studied the book, the chapters to come, and I just saw that the 8th chapter of the second part of the Exodus is called The Second Vial, or the Sea of Blood, and that reminded me of Pink Floyd, Welcome to the Machine, where they have created a Sea of Blood.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I was just looking that up in the Bible.
Oh, indoctrination. Even the rock musicians indoctrinate, don't they now?
It's just an agenda. It's just the same thing all around. It's just all on all certain levels, in book reading and movies and so on, and they all have biblical references. The problem is that mostly they have false references, and on purpose. You see, that's just
on purpose. Yeah, they take the truth and twist it into a lie.
Yeah. That's a twisted thing. It's the same why the mirror is a favorite object in sorcery. You see, because it twists the image around.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's a problem, and so that if you read the Bible or read a biblical book like this, then you get 180 degrees, and most of the times to the common so-called knowledge from textbooks in the church, in a school, for example. Yeah, so that's the opposite to the official teaching, which in every time I see an official teaching, it's almost every time in Luciferian doctrine, it's almost every time not in line with the Bible, of course, you see, because they have a Luciferian doctrine since 60, 70, 80 years or more. 100 years about when Lucis Trust was founded.
True, yeah.
So we're in the 4th or 5th generation now since then. And if you look how people dress nowadays, how people talk nowadays, the level of education goes down the drain.
Yep, there's a more and more purpose and meaning behind being a sectarian now, isn't there? separating yourself from the world, not participating in the things going on in this world because they are hideous. They're getting more and more hideous so slowly, and they do it in such a way. I forget now, Jörg, I was listening a long time ago to one of your readings you did in Rulers of Evil, and you were talking about sophistry, and you were saying to some extent, I'm paraphrasing now totally, that they get you in a way that you're enticed and you're tempted to have something that you really should not even think about having ever.
Right. That's how they work with casuistry and sophistry. They turn shit into gold.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Right. Yep. Like a fly on a turd. Yep. It's really, really, if you just smell it, it stinks so bad. Why would you ever want to get involved with that? I don't know. But, this is exactly how it works for us because we're fallen creatures. We're desperately in need of our Savior. That's the purpose of doing all of these discussions and readings and just trying to encourage others to do their own research,
Listen, what they are doing when I say they turn shit into gold, what they are doing is they are using their spiritual exercises, and that's all visual. We live in a world today that is completely visual. Children are raised in a way that they only rely on their vision, and that they rely on their vision, therefore they are given iPhones at the age of 3, sometimes even earlier.
It's a shame,
So the point when I say, just let me finish my sentence, please, because please keep your comment in mind, but I want to finish my train of thought. When they only raise us in the way that we are led by what we can visualize or what is visualized in the world, it is very easy to turn shit into gold. Because when you touch that, you see, gold is not that soft. When you smell it, you see, gold doesn't smell like that. But when you only live in the visual world, you can be betrayed and you will take shit for gold. And that's what they do. That's what they did with their Ratio Studiorum educational technique. They started in the midst of the 16th century, right after the foundation of the Jesuit order. Their paper Ratio Studiorum came out in the 1590s or something, but that's not the point. They practiced that already from the beginning. And they use sophistry and casuistry to tell you that black is white and white is black, that the truth is a lie and that the lie is truth, and that shit is gold. And therefore they need you to visualize everything. And then they're going to use their spiritual exercises on you, because they are spiritual and visual exercises. Visions in the spirit, that's what it's all about. You have to lose all the other senses. You don't have to smell, you don't have to touch, you don't have to taste anymore. Only vision is important
anymore.
Only what we show you is important. And do you want to know where that culminated into? 9/11. Everybody was taken by the pictures they saw on the television. Oh, a plane hits the tower. Oh, the tower crashes down. I saw it, so it's true. That's the point. The people saw it and they took it for real. They sell you shit for gold. Think about that.
Yeah, and they all need some kind of experts. They don't think for themselves. You see, I just came across someone who was offending me because I had a different opinion about the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I couldn't get any argument because my opponent wasn't open for any argument, but was also only attacking my person, of course. And so it really makes no sense. The problem is that most people need a mediator, they need a television set, they need some kind of fancy smartphone application to get something done or so. They haven't been taught to think freely, and they are not used to think freely, or even to make a combination between events. They are not used to do it. They have not learned it, and so in later times, they are upset if you put them with the nose to some events, and they shook their head and they say, no, it cannot be true because it didn't come in the newspaper, it wasn't shown on the TV set, and my neighbors have a different opinion on this and that. Well, they don't read their Bibles, they don't read any books, they are so dependent on their technology, and if you come across with the truth, people stare in your eyes, think you got three heads, and truth, okay, I don't have a truth application on my smartphone, so I don't get it because I'm not used to hear the truth. It's so absurd, the truth, in these days, that people think you're the lunatic, but you're not the lunatic, you're the one who's telling the truth, but then you're the outsider, because in this world, the truth is Jesus Christ, and if you speak about Jesus Christ, then you're speaking the truth, and that people are not used to do it. They are used to lie, to live in the lie, and to live their dream. And the dream that they're living is the dream that they can be gods on this world. They don't have to follow any orders, any commands. They do as thou will, and they have fun with it. And so you're robbing them their fun, you're getting them out, you're pushing them out of their comfort zone, and you're then the aggressor, you see. It's everywhere, it's completely twisted. You try to save them, you try to help them, but they think that you're the aggressor.
In this world, the truth is put into straitjacket by doctors who are actually the lie.
I suppose in the near future, maybe people are not allowed to read anymore. I don't know. It's just hard to, or books wouldn't be allowed, anything like that. So it's just the people are so used to do it, to pay cash. Pay cash. Oh no! Pay cash is not good. You can be robbed. And pay with your credit card and use your smartphone application and take it with you and have the new chip in your passport so you can be identified and you save time and this and that. They're so dependent on that technology. And believe me, I don't know if I will live long enough to see that, but I think that this technology thing will turn around and the man will be the slave of the technology age.
Yeah, it will turn around and bite you in the ass. That's how they say that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you guys something, just a little side note about the technology. I recently bought a tiny little smartphone called a Palm, and I was trying to get the Palm to work for me, and you have to have something. It's called a companion phone. You're supposed to use it on Verizon wireless network. And of course, if you put a SIM in there, you can use it. It's a GSM phone. You can use it on any network. Mm-hmm. But what I wasn't aware of when I bought it, and I didn't buy it new, I bought it on eBay for $90, I think it was. I wasn't aware that you can't receive text unless it is synced to another application outside of the realm of the smartphone, like Google Voice or something like this. And I just was like, you gotta be kidding me. This is the stupidest thing. I mean, it's a great tiny little phone you can tuck in your pocket. And, for me, it's perfect because I need something small. I don't want a big, huge, blocky thing. But it's so frustrating because now I have to sync the messages to get it to work. And I'm just ready to smash it already. I just bought it, and I'm ready to smash it because it's so frustrating.
Well, that's what you very often experience when you buy things off eBay.
Well, I mean, go figure. This is how technology is now. They make everything obsolete the moment it comes out. I mean, all the cell phones are now obsolete because you got to have I hate this 4G crap. That's what they're doing here. I don't know if they're doing that in Europe yet, but they're going to eliminate 3G entirely. in the city.
They are pushing 5G over here.
Exactly, right. So now they're going to push 5G on everybody. And yeah, this is just lunacy, man. This literally is lunacy. And yeah, we're living in the beast system. I mean, hello. And do you ever hear that in the church? Do they ever talk about this in the pulpits of the United States or around the world? About the beast being our government? No. Because they want to indoctrinate you with a lie and use you like a tool. That's what they've done. Church and state united. It's as simple as that. I hate to break it to you.
Yeah, so who's going to read these old books in the future? Now, you see, we are making it a little bit more easy so that people only have to listen. They have to not to read it for themselves, because I think that these books will soon be more rarer than before, or even been forbidden or so. So you have the modern day and age MP3 or more on a more compressed rate kind of technology, which you can like a watch on your wrist or so to get with you everywhere you are. But the problem is that with a book, you are intimate with yourself, and you can do it on your own without any control. But everything which is electronic can be monitored, you see, so that everybody knows, oh, Bret at the moment is writing this book or is reading this book, and oh, no, this is forbidden language. This is against the system, so it's just not fine, and he gets a strike on his social points, you see.
Yeah, it's a way to... It's a dog leash, you know. I remember someone talking about the leash. You know, it's like when your wife is calling you all the time, instructing you what to do. They give you the cell phone, and that's your leash. See, we used to joke about that. You know, it's just a joke. It's not serious.
In Germany, it's not a joke. In Germany, do you know how the housewife is called in Germany?
Go ahead.
The housewife in general is called in Germany the government. So you have to ask the wife of the house to spend money on your new cell phone or spend money on your car whatsoever, because it's I have to ask the government. It's just a strange.
Oh, sure.
And who is biblically the government of the household?
Man.
Exactly. Turned around, right?
It's
mirror image.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Here we are again.
I suggest, Bret, that we're going to bring it down, because we're already about an hour.
Okay,
we are
good.
We are rambling on. I
mean, we're rambling. We're ranting.
Like this, we can do a discussion for the next 5 hours, but I don't have the time.
No. But I don't think our listeners do either.
I just want to close with a suggestion. We call this video "Turning Shit into Gold."
Well, yeah, I think that some of our listeners probably don't like the...
Well, you can write SH ... into gold.
Yeah.
Leave something to the imagination.
Well,
I will call it this
is
way
close
anyway.
enough.
Yeah.
Without having to, F-bomb and all that. I mean, because the S word just leads to F-bombing, and, not many people really appreciate that anymore. I don't really, we've been working with this new clients that, all the people in there are F-bombing left and right. And I'll tell you, it gets contagious. It really does. It really rubs off on you. I don't like it all the time, I get home and I want to get away from it.
I don't like cursing anyway. I like to use proper language.
Right.
But I don't think that there's something wrong with calling a duty a duty. So
yeah, that's true. I agree. You got to call a spade, right?
Exactly. That's my point.
It's part of life, and I think that's kind of what, I'm beating around the bush a lot here, but really when it comes down to it, a lot of people don't have enough backbone to say it the way it is. So they're afraid they're going to offend their significant other or another family member or whatever.
They want to be politically correct, brother. That's it.
Yeah, religiously correct. Yes. And that's what we end up with is the Jesuits ruling over the whole thing. And that's what we got. So, all right, Yerk, Michael, should we close it up for today?
Yep.
Yep.
Great. So God bless everybody. We'll catch up with you next time. In The Great Exodus or The Time of the End, How Near Are We to It? By James Aiken Wylie, 1862. Bye-bye.